Thank you. Thanks, Elise. Okay. All ready to go? Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to the people on social media tuning in. Very important for particularly people in southeast Queensland to be aware that the IGEM review report has been tabled in Parliament and makes a number of recommendations. But I wanted to first off by saying, we've got some exceptional disaster management emergency response frameworks here in Queensland. In fact, amongst the best in the world. And we've got some outstanding individuals who contribute to that every single day. In fact, some of the people behind me are recognised as amongst the best in the world when it comes to emergency response and disaster management. And they're supported by literally thousands and thousands of people right across the state, volunteers, officers and staff of our emergency services and other support agencies in the work they do. So I wanted to start off by commending them for every contribution that they make every time that there is a natural disaster. They literally put themselves in the line of danger to help others to keep the community safe. And I wanted to express also my gratitude to the Inspector General Emergency Management, who is recognised as the gold standard when it comes to review, reflection and improving systems, particularly when it comes to emergency management and disaster management. So to the Inspector General Emergency Management and his team, I'd like to thank you for the work that you've done on this report. And can I finally thank the Queenslanders who contributed to this report. This report received the biggest volume of submissions from Queenslanders that the IGEM has ever seen. So to those Queenslanders who have contributed to the report, I thank you. For starters, the report makes 19 recommendations, and I'm very pleased to say that all of those recommendations, the implementation has commenced, and the completion of implementation of those recommendations are on track. And that gives us great assurance for the severe weather season that we've got ahead of us, that not only are we well prepared, but the lessons from the Inspector General of Emergency Management are already being put in place and will be in place in accordance with the due dates set out by the Inspector General of Emergency Management. Some of the recommendations the Inspector General makes in his report is around a focus on the guidance regarding flood risk and the use of emergency alert systems by responsible agencies, about identifying options for strengthening the flood warning network, around providing additional instructional support, training and exercising for local government users of the emergency alert system, and increasing submissions of the local government opt-in systems for information services around emergency alerts. It's really important to highlight that when it comes to keeping the community informed around natural disasters, that there is a multimodal approach to messaging. Emergency alerts are one thing, but also the opt-in services that provide information from councils are another, social media is another, the media is another, and also looking after your neighbours is another as well. So it's important that with every aspect of that multimodal distribution of information, that we have the best possible systems. It is important to highlight as well that the report notes that the Wivenhoe Dam was well managed throughout the event and that the dam safety and regulatory system when it comes to dams is mature. I wanted to also just give a couple of examples around particularly where there can be some improvements made. So one of the things that the IGEM mentioned in his report is that there has been some examples where there is a lack of training and awareness with some local government staff, in particular where some of them weren't aware of the emergency alert system, and as a consequence of that and a lack of understanding with timings, targeting and messaging, there was some delays when it came to the requesting of those alerts. For instance, and I don't want to pick on anyone in particular, but there is one of the councils who have been offered training for a number of years, but haven't chosen to take that training up. Like, for instance, the Brisbane City Council last accessed the emergency alert training module, known as Module 2, in 2018. Now, I'm very pleased that they've now signed up to access that training, and they're due to have that training on the 24th of October. But it is important for local governments to access that training, to connect with QFES, to make sure that they have the awareness around how the National Emergency Alert System works, particularly when it comes to timings, targeting and messaging. The other thing I wanted to say as well is just the important around this particular event. and the timings around requests for emergency alerts. And I know that everyone will take time to have a look at the report, but there's a very important timeline that's been put out in the report at page 149 to 151, which shows where all the alerts were issued and requested. The interesting thing, and I don't again want to pick on Brisbane City Council, but notwithstanding, the severe rain starting Thursday and Friday, and notwithstanding that many councils issued emergency alerts on the Friday and Saturday, Brisbane City Council did not request that first alert until Sunday night. And it had been raining for a number of days. And that timeline is set out in the report. Can I conclude by just commending everyone for their contribution to the report, but also wishing all our emergency responders and also our volunteers particularly all the very best for the disaster season ahead. We are well prepared. QFES particularly will be working very closely with local governments as we head into the severe disaster season so that they're well prepared. And at the end of the day, people also need to be constantly aware of the circumstances, so please keep informed from the Bureau of Meteorology, and particularly don't take any risks around severe weather, particularly floodwaters. If it's flooded, forget it. I'll now ask the Inspector General of Emergency Management to provide some comments.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Annastacia Dawson. I'm the Queensland's Inspector General of Emergency Management. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the people that were impacted by the flood events subject to the review between February and March this year, and acknowledge the distress that these communities have experienced. It was one of 4 compounding rainfall events that actually occurred. The event we looked at was event number 3, and I'd also like to acknowledge the emergency responders from the emergency services and volunteer agencies that attended tirelessly to assist people in their hour of need. The office was tasked by the government to undertake a review of the rainfall and flooding event that occurred in southeast Queensland between the 22nd of February and the 7th of March this year. And as part of the review, the office invited submissions from the community and all levels of government, not-for-profit organisations and from volunteer agencies. And I'm very pleased to say that 247 submissions were received, and I'm very grateful for the people that took their time to actually make a submission to us. We also conducted 13 community forums to hear firsthand from affected communities and especially about the experiences that they had. We also engaged with 2 of Queensland's universities to conduct research in support of the review. The first was around effective communication, which you'll find at Appendix D, clear, explicit, translatable language, which is at Appendix E, and also community sentiment, which is at Appendix F. So I commend those to you. The office also conducted a series of interviews with entities and looked at other relevant reports from information to assess the effectiveness of the response. We were particularly asked to have regard for other reports that were either published or about to be published, and there were 3 that we actually looked at. There are valuable learnings from this report, and it reflects on through highlighting good practice, but as well as the opportunities for enhancement to ensure that the system has continuous improvement in Queensland's disaster management arrangements. And as such, we've made 19 recommendations. Most of those recommendations, there's about 8 that do apply to emergency alerts, and they are quite straightforward, which is around actually enhancing training and then also how we get the system to work better for us. But I might pass over now to Deputy Commissioner Palaszczuk, who's the State Disaster Coordinator. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. Good morning. Can I just add to the fact that that was a very challenging event earlier this year. We saw what was largely unexpected and unpredictable deluge that resulted not only in damage to our community that's costing billions of dollars, but also sadly the loss of 13 lives, and I don't think we should forget that. We remain, and we always are, through our systems, committed to continual improvement, so we welcome the Inspector General's report, which I think takes us to that point. I know, working through that event, how hard everyone worked to try and make sure that that worked at all levels of government. but we know that we can improve. So that takes us to that point now with this piece of work, so we can look at how we can improve that. To get that in place for this season, we've already started exercising, so this has been happening right across all of our agencies, all layers of government, including the Commonwealth, and we've run a number of scenario-based exercises already, right up to the Queensland Disaster Management Committee, which sits over the top of all of our disaster arrangements, to make sure that we are ready for this season that is coming for us. And I'll just finish off by reminding everyone that the outlook is looking very challenging. We are expecting at least what we saw last year, if not worse, in terms of flooding in the east coast of Australia. That means that everyone needs to be ready for that. This is Get Ready Queensland Week, and the message to all of our community is to make sure that they understand the risks that they can be exposed to, that they have a plan, and that they pack a kit. And they need to know what that risk means for them locally and what the options are for them. So stay connected, listening to the messaging, both of emergency services, but also particularly of the Bureau of Meteorology as we move forward. We know it's going to happen at some stage, so we need to be ready for that. And I can assure everyone that all of the emergency services are prepared for that. We're planning right through to next year about how we can support each other to make sure that we keep our community safe. Thank you.
Just final remarks from Acting Commissioner Boston.
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon. Could I also just start by acknowledging all of those people throughout Queensland that have been impacted by the floods earlier this year, and particularly those families that lost loved ones, and for us in particular also Mel Dray, who passed away in the line of duty death as an SES volunteer trying to protect her local community in Lowood. For us, we welcome the Inspector General's report and the review and the recommendations. We are well progressed already with respect to the recommendations, and any of those recommendations that have been highlighted for this coming severe weather season, we are confident and we will have those completed. We're currently working with councils across a whole range of different aspects, recognising that councils have a primary responsibility across disaster management and in particular warnings as well for floods in their local community. With respect to the emergency alert recommendations, we've already got 600 staff across councils and other organisations that will be trained between now and November, and we've got additional staff training and training for the emergency warning system associated with that requirement as well. It's also important to acknowledge that the emergency warning system itself is but one aspect of the warning system. We have a range of different tools to make sure that the community is informed before, during and even after in terms of flood impacts or any disaster impact for that matter. So I'm confident that we have the systems in place, and we're working closely with all of our partners to make sure that we are ready, and we're asking the community to be ready. And obviously right across Queensland we continue to work very closely with the communities across Queensland, acknowledging the fact that there is a large amount of variability in what that looks like in the far north part of Queensland in terms of severe weather, floods again, and as we've heard from the State Disaster Coordinator already, that with this forthcoming season, the soil is already saturated. The normal weather events, particularly in southeast Queensland, that we can get, the normal weather events in November, December, we know that that will create early and flash flooding. And so already we're trying to warn and prepare our communities to make sure that they're situationally aware and that we're ready, and we'll be making sure that they're fully informed as those events occur. Thank you.
Questions about the report?
Yeah, could someone, City Council too slow to request that alert? Do you know why, and why it was the lowest priority?
Well, the report outlines, the timeline, the facts around when the emergency alerts were requested by all councils, but particularly there's a highlight around Brisbane City Council, and the Inspector General of Emergency Management just highlights those facts. The heavy rain sort of started on the Thursday, Friday. Many councils requested the alerts on the Friday and Saturday. Brisbane City Council, in their own report, which was done by the former governor, says that they recognised that there was a need for an emergency alert on the Saturday night, but the actual request for the alert was not received until the Sunday night. So I know that the Lord Mayor's made a number of comments around what he perceives are delays. Frankly, the big delay has to be associated with when you make the request. The The state government and our partner agencies work very hard with councils to ensure that they have an appreciation about how the system works and how we can support them in using the system. But, frankly, the Brisbane City Council is the biggest council in Australia. They've got the biggest budget, they've got the biggest staff. This is pretty straightforward stuff, and I am pleased to see that they'll be attending a training session in a week or so.
Could something be said about the state government though? Because on the Saturday the Premier came out at a press conference and was downplaying the risk of floods. That was on the Saturday.
Yes, but local governments have the lead when it comes to managing local disasters in their areas. All the other councils requested emergency alerts around the Friday and Saturday.
Given that finding, should the councils be relieved of that power and given to another agency, given to emergency services?
Look, there's been many reviews around best practice when it comes to natural disasters and emergency response, and all of them conclude that the best responses are always local responses. But that being said, the Inspector General of Emergency Management makes a particular recommendation of the ability for the state to override potentially a local government or other agency when it comes to requesting an emergency alert, and that's something that we've accepted, and obviously that power will obviously be used in critical situations.
Could someone please walk us through, under the current process, if an emergency alert is to be issued, how that works up the chain, and under the changes put forward by the IGM, how that would function after the 1st of November?
Yeah. In 1 second I'll get the Acting Deputy Commissioner, Joanne Grunfeld, to run through that. That's her portfolio area. But it's really critical when it comes to understanding how the National Emergency Alert System works. It's probably 3 key things. An understanding about timeliness of request, an understanding about targeting of the request for the recipients, and an understanding of the messaging. And the Inspector General makes comments about all of those things in his report. The process is one which does have great structure, and for the most part, local governments use it very effectively. It's used in a very mature way in many council areas around the state. My council area of Moreton Bay uses it brilliantly. The Gold Coast is very effective, Logan. So this is about making sure all of the councils have an appreciation of those particular themes when it comes to using the National Emergency Alert System. But as both the Inspector General and I said previously, it is only one way of getting the message out. The media is another, social media is another, the opt-in systems that the council uses is another, talking with your friends and neighbours is another. It's just part of the layering when it comes to the messaging. It's an important part, but it's only one part of the layering around messaging. Did you want to speak to the Acting Deputy now? Or?
A few more for you.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, the report notes the project's being considered to better integrate the use of rainfall forecasts on dam operations. There's no deadline on when that project is due to be finalised. Will it be November 1?
Let me come back to you specifically. Or the Inspector General's here. He can give you that. I just wanted to. What rec are you? Can you just confirm the rec?
It's not in the recommendation. I think it's on about page 100 of the report.
Okay.
It's about a project is being considered.
Yes.
To integrate rainfall forecasts.
Yeah. Well, I know that.
Could you just explain what that project is? It's being considered.
Yeah. We'll specifically get the
reference.
reference.
The report for 6 weeks.
No, I've read the report, and obviously that is in the portfolio area of Minister Butcher. The advice I've got from his department is that the systems are mature. Of course, there is always constant review around how the systems operate, and obviously the commentary of the Inspector General of Emergency Management highlights some of the experiences that we've had in the recent event around the operations of the dam. Particularly notes that Wivenhoe Dam was operated effectively and in accordance with the guidelines, that the safety regulator around dams, the systems are mature. So all of those things feed in, but obviously when it comes to future seasons, the department and SecWater and the dam operators obviously listen to the experts. They listen to the experts around weather forecasts, but also around how best to operate the dams.
But at the moment they can't make releases based on that advice that's coming from the Bureau. They can listen to it, but they can't implement it.
Well, those systems are in place for a reason. The government, the dam operators listen to the experts.
Do you agree with the police commissioner that the police disciplinary system is broken?
Look, I think what we've seen over the last couple of weeks with the evidence coming out from the Commission of Inquiry is that there is some quite appalling behaviour and that there has been some instances where the system has failed victims, victims not only in the community but also victims in the workplace. And I'm particularly appalled by that behaviour of police officers harassing or abusing their colleagues. I think that's disgraceful and it goes against everything that I believe in around safe workplaces. So those people need to be called out and there needs to be consequences for that action. But also victims need to know and have confidence in the system that a disciplined framework will support them, but also their workforce and their workplace will support them and is in a safe place as well.
Why do you think we are seeing so many police shootings in our headlines lately?
Yeah. Look, it's a very complicated situation and, frankly, I don't think you can bundle them all together and say that they're all happening for the same reason at the same time. Obviously our police are very well trained when it comes to use of force and obviously they do a very dangerous job and they're provided with a variety of use of force options to keep them safe and the community safe, and I back them all the time, but there is also a process around reviewing particular incidents to see what were the causes, what was the response. And I don't want to get into any particular matter at the moment, but I know that it's very complicated, but I also know our police are very well trained and very skilled when it comes to using use of force options.
So 1,676
Which ones?
complaints, 738 police officers in 2 years. Is there a widespread cultural issue within the police force?
Yeah, I think the evidence is highlighted, and those particular statistics have been used. I'm not trying to explain the statistics away, but some of those complaints would be about the same officer multiple times. But whatever the numbers are, you have to have a culture in the workplace where people are supported to make complaints, and where complaints are substantiated, there's proper consequence. That is about a good culture in the workplace, and it is about a good culture for your workforce. And obviously the evidence that we've heard over the last few weeks has highlighted that there is some shortcomings. There is some shortcomings when it comes to ensuring that that culture is where it needs to be, and I know the Commissioner is committed to the change around that, and also the government's committed to the change, which is why we called for that Commission of Inquiry.
November last year,
Sorry.
November last year, police began reviewing results coming out of the DNA lab. That was November 2021. When were you first told of the problems in the lab?
Oh, look, it wasn't at that time. It was a number of months after. In fact, it was. I'll get the exact date, but I think it was around May. It was around the point of decision around the Commission of Inquiry.
6 months after they started noticing problems in the lab, and they were raising problems with their counterparts in Queensland Health, nobody in the police thought it was a good idea to tell the Minister?
It wasn't briefed up to me, no.
Are you disappointed by that?
Yes.
Minister, just on youth crime for a second, we've got some vision of a 13-year-old
Yes.
attacking a woman at a train station, train station. Is it just further evidence that something more needs to be done on youth crime?
Look, appalling behaviour, and I'm so sorry that has happened to that lady. And I'd like to acknowledge that there are government support agencies out there that can support her. But also, these young people need to be held accountable for that appalling act. And I know that there's a couple of them that are still outstanding, and I'm hopeful that the police will arrest them soon. And I was just going to say as well, our laws particularly around youth bail, are amongst the strongest in the nation. But obviously we're always listening to the community and always looking to do what we can to support victims more and enhance community safety.
And on alleged shootings, just that you mentioned before that you didn't want to speak specifically, but we had one as recently as yesterday, a man shot dead. The public are saying, with all the shootings lately, that are police getting trigger happy? What do you say to that?
Well, I can assure them they're not. Our police are very, very well trained. They are very skilled when it comes to use of force options, and our police have a variety of use of force options. We've also got to always remember our police are doing a very dangerous job. It's a very dangerous job, which is why they do have a variety of use of force options available to them. The vast majority of Queenslanders I speak to support our police in the work that they do, and are very grateful that they have those use of force options to keep them safe.
Does a different approach need to be taken in the case of clear mental health issues without talking about a specific case?
Well, I think the critical thing here is it always comes back to the safety of the officer and the safety of the community. You know, it's very complicated matters, and, you know, there may be many explanations about why people might find themselves in those complicated situations. But at the end of the day, safety always has to be paramount.
We've seen multiple cases where tasers have proven ineffective and critical points in implementation. Is it time to look at a different non-lethal method?
Well, we're always looking at options for our police, and in fact, and you are there, it's a very good investment. We're going to become one of the first policing agencies in the world which has rolled out the widespread integrated load-bearing ballistic vests, so enhancing safety for our officers. But we're always looking at opportunities to enhance resourcing for our police and making sure that they are fit for purpose, but also the variety is available for officers as well. One of the other investments that we've made, and again it's a world first, it's the rollout of the new body-worn cameras, which have the live streaming opportunity as well. And not only are we have one of the biggest fleets of body-worn cameras in the world, but we will be one of the first agencies in the world to actually have the live stream capability as well.
Just to clarify something you said before on the DNA inquiry, you said you were briefed around May when the commission was ordered, or June?
Yes, it was just before that.
The health minister was briefed in March, so that's 2 months
I'd have to
before.
check the exact
Did she
dates.
never raise these issues with you? That's months before though. She knew something was going on.
The first I was aware of it. To the best of my recollection was just before the Commission of Inquiry was ordered.
Are you concerned that one of your colleagues didn't even raise this with you, given she was briefed up about this? Did she not take it to cabinet?
Look, it's important for all agencies to brief up to their ministers. And look, I've already expressed my disappointment that I wasn't provided with a briefing on that sooner.
Just some questions for the Inspector General.
Yep.
Inspector General, how long has the alert system been in place?
So the emergency alert system was put in place in about 2009, I think it was, when the Black Fire went through. I just checked. 2009? Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. But it has been upgraded since then, and so I think that's the very first time it was put into play.
So are you surprised then that the lack of training essentially was the weak point in this event?
So I'm not surprised insofar as that the emergency alert system is available for all types of emergencies. But it's when we actually get to use them and how often we get to use them. So one of the recommendations you'll see in there is really about upgrading a bit of training for those who are already trained, and then obviously encourage further training in that regard.
And you also, one of the recommendations was for an urgent alert.
Yeah.
When it's a high priority. How could we have an alert system when urgent ones aren't being used?
Because where we sit within the framework of an event, we get different views about what's actually happening. So the closer to the front line we are, the more consumed we are with the actual event itself. The further back we go, we get more of a helicopter view. So one of the that recommendation particularly relates to those very senior members, such as the one standing behind me, that would then be empowered if they saw something. They would actually be able to be not only the requester but also the authoriser to get that alert out, and then to advise local government and other agencies that has then gone out.
Are you able to explain the project to integrate rainfall forecasts?
Yeah, so that particular comment in page 101 was actually a comment made by the dam safety regulator to our people. So if you go back to about page, where are we? It's about page earlier where we talk about weather. So it's actually a listed place of around about somewhere between 40 and 50. One of the things there is weather forecasting is extremely complex, as we say in there, which is the information provided by the Bureau. So the actual forecasting is, again, the science, and then trying to work out what's going to happen from there. So one of the observations by the dam safety regulator is that was a matter that they were going to look at independently with the Bureau, and that's acceptable. That's a matter for them to look at that. Yeah.
Did they give you a deadline on when they
No, no, they didn't. But again, what we're talking about is we're between events. So the dam safety regulator also has one of the recommendations from the IGM review, and I'm pretty confident that they will be looking at that.
And can you just explain recommendation 18 talks about reviewing the emergency action plan for referable to M guidelines? What prompted you to make that
So part of that is around the warnings that are given to the community. So in one particular case, if there was a dam failure or likelihood of a dam failure, then the community would be notified. Where there's overtopping of a dam, so there's no gates, and when it's full and the water comes out, we need to find out who's going to tell the community, who's going to take the lead. We asked the dam safety regulator to lead that conversation so that there is a joined up approach to it, and I think you'll find that that also talks about local government, it talks about disaster districts, and it talks about how we all come together to actually inform the community. If you go to the standard for disaster management, it talks about sharing of information, so that there's a sharing of information that leads to a common understanding of the risk. Once you have a common understanding of the risk, as an individual, we then have the information that we can make a decision for ourselves based on what our level of risk tolerance is. Because you don't have to wait to be told to do something, to leave or to lift things. You just have to understand that you are actually empowered as an individual to make a decision.
Your report highlights a point of difference between what you found in Mr. Jersey's report.
Yep.
Can you, why do you think the points are different?
So I don't think there's. I think the point of where we actually agree with His Honour is that we thought that the use of the tool of the emergency alert was about a day and a half late, and we accept that. The fact is that other local systems, as the Minister's alluded to, have been used, so they're the locally owned systems. One of the things is, though, we could only find an emergency alert that had been lodged at 7:07 on the Sunday evening. So in light of no further information to that, that's where our points, where we took a different view. But you've got to look at also the terms of reference for the two reviews, and we highlight that as well, and the fact that where we source our information from was also slightly different as well.
In terms of recommendation 3 and 4, I guess could you walk us through how the system works currently and how it would look with these changes in place?
Okay, let me just pull out 3 and 4.
That's
I knew you'd ask me that question, and I thought, well, I better print them out.
See on the emergency alert system.
Yep.
I'm sorry to do this. Are there any other questions for the Minister? He's just got to go somewhere and then...
Parliament sitting today. While Alastair looks at that, I'm happy to take remaining questions for me, if there are any more for me.
I just wanted to go back to the disciplinary system. Just to
Sorry, Alastair,
Yep,
I'll just
I'm out
answer
your
this
way.
and then I'll run off you.
Did you feel that it needed to be overhauled? Are you going to commit to any changes for the disciplinary system?
Look, obviously we want to listen to the best placed people when it comes to any potential improvements on that. So the Commission of Inquiry is reporting next month. It's only a month away. So let's wait and see what their conclusions are and their observations are. But obviously the evidence that we've seen over the last few weeks shows that there needs to be some adjustment to how the discipline system is applied, particularly at that LMR level, the local managerial resolution level. And to be honest, the Commission is already acting on that and is looking to implement some changes already.
I've got a question for the Deputy Police Commissioner, if that's okay.
All done with me? Okay, thank you.
Obviously yesterday we just got some initial details about the shooting in East Brisbane. Have you had any update on the series of events that led up to officers firing their shots?
Look, that's under full investigation, as you'd be appreciated by the Ethical Standards Command overview by the coroner, and of course the CCC has a role in all of that. We will let that investigation run its course. At this stage, there is clarity around what occurred. What you've heard publicly is essentially where we're at the moment. So, look, I'm the deputy responsible for that area. I'm satisfied with the way the thing is progressing. I'm satisfied with the way things has happened, but of course we have to wait for the outcome of the investigation.
So police have been able to firm up that the fellow that caused the disturbance at Fish Lane by crawling into the roof cavity, that is the same man that was shot.
I won't confirm anything at that. That's all subject to investigation.
Can you give us an update on how your officers are doing?
Look, the officers had support wrapped around them by the organisation, and also, of course, the union is very active in that space, so they will be fully supported.
And into the chocolate bothering us?
That's all right.
The ineffective use of the taser yesterday, is that some concern generally?
Look, every time we have a use of force deployment, I think we're getting one now. We will. What we'll do is review our use of force deployments. Now, with tasers, there is an error rate from time to time because it requires a particular approach in the way they are deployed. So we'll look at that as whether it was the circumstances that led to that or there is some issue with the actual taser itself. But as the Minister said, our officers are equipped with and trained in a use of force applications in a variety of senses, and what they have to do is make a decision. Clearly in this instance, they felt they needed to use the taser, it didn't work, and then they had to resort to lethal use of force, which is a tragic outcome for everybody. So what we need to do is understand why that occurred.
And the increased rate of shootings in recent times, is that of a concern to you?
Look,
Does that say anything?
Look, what it says is that it's a pretty challenging operating environment for our police out there. We have seen this sort of thing before in our jurisdiction, as well as other jurisdictions where you seem to have these types of events occurred. Generally speaking, they are, and we have in the past had coronial inquests into collective shootings, and in pretty well every instance our officers have been validated in terms of their decision making. So we'll look at that with the same sort of degree of forensic intenseness.
We get Mr. Palaszczuk.
Sure.
Back to your question.
Yes, please.
Questions, so around the recommendations 3 and 4. Excellent. So recommendation 3, just for the benefit of everybody here that may not have the report, is that Queensland Fire and Emergency Services lead an urgent multi-agency to include Queensland Police Service and also Brisbane City Council, who, when we were talking to the council, offered to participate in this, to look at the workflow. So it's a really quick look at the workflow. How does the workflow go? Are there any opportunities there to look at any adjustments in relation to that? So that is something that is rapid before the next season. And number 4 was a question that had been asked by the lady over here to my right before, which is around the urgent approval and distribution without delay. And that comes to, it's used in other styles of emergency where people that sit in different sections of the response can actually look down into the event and actually see things that are not readily apparent to others. And there's normally senior level command, so at the level of the people that are standing behind me, they can actually make a decision. So they can request and authorise, but then advise others what they have done. But it's really about trying to get the message out. I go back to what is the standard for disaster management in the state, and it is about the sharing information in a timely way that we can all have a shared understanding of the risk, and from that shared understanding of the risk, we as individuals can actually make a decision about what we want to do for ourselves, but also to our families as well.
As it stands now, how does the workflow go?
So the workflow normally flows from the front, which is at local government level. The request goes through, it comes back up to the State Disaster Coordination Centre, it's then put into the system, but it's a little bit more complicated than what I'm actually trying to explain. So the system has levels of priority, so there are 3 messages, we've explained that in the report itself, and so really it's about, if you look at the timing of all of this, you have not only Brisbane under duress, you've got southeast Queensland under duress, you've got northern New South Wales going down into central New South Wales, and we saw what happened there. And it's the same system that's used for other things such as Amber Alerts, which is where there's an urgent message out, normally by law enforcement. So it's very similar to if you've got a text message or you're trying to send an email, they're normally capped at a limit. So the moment you try to go over that limit, it actually slows the system right down. So this is about, what we've asked is to look at the training to actually identify the opportunities to leverage advantages, which we think are there, and that with that, then that will actually help to enhance the speed of the system as well. But it is a national system subscribed to by all states and territories in Australia. Because we are the most disaster-prone state in Australia, we tend to use it more than probably others.
Were we well prepared?
Were we well prepared? I think we say that in there. We were well prepared, but I think there's a lot of differences. If you read the report, one of the things you'll see in the report actually highlights the difference in the rainfall. We do a comparison between 10 and 11. We greatly acknowledge the assistance of others in pulling that together. You also see where the rainfall was different, and so what you see is smaller creeks and those sorts of areas and crossland flows. So again, it's different, but that's the thing with disasters in this state, is they're not always exactly the same as what they were before.
You noted in this report that the community seems to have underestimated the risk that was present to them, and you said that was that finding was in the 2011 report, and in the 2019 monsoon crop one you found that as well. Why is it that we just don't seem to grasp it when we are?
Because the events are different. You could have a property that didn't flood in 1011, but flooded in this event, and this is some of the things we've seen. The other part to this is that one of the methodologies of getting the message out is through this saturation of message. So through social media, through media like we're doing today, through the television. Print is probably going to be a little bit behind in that regard, but also through the emergency alert. What we do ask people to do is to actually identify how they want to engage with the emergency services during and immediately in the lead up to the event. When the message comes, the emergency warning to evacuate, if you look in the report, you'll see we've had some linguistics done around the messaging and how we should word that. So people become very focused on their current situation, which is normal, and so therefore it's like trying to work out, well, what do I do? What we're asking people to do is to read the message, listen to the message. We will always do our best to get the message to you in a timely way. That is one of the reasons why we look at these events. But with that, when the message comes out to leave, go now, that is probably very on point with now is the time to be walking out the door. So a lot of the preparation work has to start now. So you've heard references to get ready. You've heard Commissioner Wassing say that, and you've heard the Minister say that. It's really important that you don't leave it to the last moment, because you don't know when that moment's going to be.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.